And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Tuesday, February 14th, that Valentine's Day thing. I am your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. So go there and feed yourself on news. A state senator and his wife said they were beaten at a Niagara Falls casino hotel after the lawmaker tried to break up an argument between two men. Senator Mark Grisanti said he suffered bruised ribs in the Friday, February 10th altercation. His wife, Maria, was diagnosed with a concussion and possible broken nose. The fight happened following a fundraising gala for the Seneca Diabetes Foundation at the Seneca Niagara Casino Events Center. The Grisantis attended because their daughter was part of the entertainment for the night, performing with the Buffalo singing act, the Skintas. They were in the lobby around 11:30 p.m. when they encountered two men who were arguing loudly. Grisanti said he thought the men were about to come to blows, so he asked them to calm down. One of the men demanded to know his name. When he identified himself, he said the man hurled a curse word, accused him of hating the Seneca Nation, and punched him in the chest. Then Grisanti said a woman with the man socked him on the side of the head. The Okla Sioux tribe of South Dakota said it is demanding $500 million in damages for the cost of health care, social services, and child rehabilitation caused by chronic alcoholism on the reservation, which encompasses some of the most impoverished counties in the United States. 1 in 4 children born on the reservation suffers to some extent from fetal alcohol syndrome or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and the average life expectancy is estimated between 45 and 52 years there, the shortest in North America except for Haiti, according to the lawsuit. The average American life expectancy is 77.5 years now. The lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Nebraska also targets 4 beer stores in White Clay, a Nebraska town near the reservation border that, despite having only about a dozen residents, sold nearly 5 million cans of beer in 2010. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has awarded more than $90 million in housing block grant allocations to 31 tribes in Oklahoma. HUD officials say Oklahoma's share is part of more than $400 million that was distributed nationwide. The money is intended to benefit low-income families living on Native American reservations or in other communities. According to HUD, the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma received the largest single amount of any tribe in the state, more than $29 million. The Muskogee Creek Nation was awarded more than $15 million. The Chickasaw Nation got more than $12 million, and more than $11 million went to the Choctaw Nation. The funding can be used for housing development, crime prevention, safety, and housing services to eligible families. Test results the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has cited repeatedly as evidence that irrigated crops and livestock next to a polluted Nevada mine are safe for consumption were based on samples from 4 onions taken more than 4 years ago, newly disclosed documents show. As recently as December of last year, EPA referred to the tests conducted in 2007 to address concerns raised by a neighboring tribe and others about elevated levels of uranium and arsenic identified in irrigation wells used historically for alfalfa and onions north of the old Anaconda copper mine. The site is near Yerington, about 60 miles southeast of Reno, Nevada. The disclosure of the tiny sample has further riled leaders of the Yerington Paiute tribe, who say that mischaracterization of the test by the EPA undermines assurances from the agency that crops are safe to eat in the Mason Valley, an irrigated oasis in Nevada's high desert where only 5 inches of precipitation falls annually. The 4 onions were collected within about 2,000 feet of each other, and the contractor made it clear to the EPA that the sample wasn't large enough to draw any scientific conclusions. The mine's neighbors didn't learn about that until about 8 years ago, that Anaconda officials had actually known as early as the 1970s that a toxic stew was brewing beneath the mine as a result of uranium and other chemicals leaking through leach ponds where the copper was processed. Since then, the EPA has been assessing and working with the state and others to try to contain the towering waste piles, open pit lake, and old leach ponds spread across an area the size of 3,000 football fields. EPA sampling of a different type in 2010 found that 79% of the domestic wells tested within 2 miles of the mine, where the tribe's land begins, had dangerous levels of uranium or arsenic or both, and that the water was unsafe to drink. Uranium was detected at more than 10 times the legal drinking standard of 30 micrograms per liter in one monitoring well a half-mile north of the mine, and at more than 100 times the standard at the mine itself. Since 2004, BP has been providing bottled water to hundreds of residents whose wells showed concentrations of uranium greater than 25 micrograms per liter. Wisconsin Senate Republicans on February 13th unveiled a new bill to help an iron mine open in far northwestern Wisconsin, allowing challenges in creating a new tax that would help local governments pay for damage the mine might cause. Assembly Republicans passed their own bill last month. Now the two houses must find common ground on an incredibly complex, sensitive issue before the legislative session ends in mid-March, according to the governor's schedule. A company called Gogebic Technic wants to dig a 5-mile long open pit mine in the Pinocchio Hills just south of Lake Superior near the Bad River Reservation. The company has promised the project would create hundreds of jobs, a prospect that appeals to Republicans hungry to deliver on campaign job creation promises in a state that now leads the nation in job losses each month for the last 6 months. Conservationists, though, fear the mine would pollute one of the most pristine regions in the state. The Bad River Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe, whose reservation lies just north of the mine site, is particularly concerned about runoff from the mine that could contaminate their wild rice beds and access to clean treaty resources in the region. The current bill, not yet identified as a completed bill, is called LRB, or Legislative Reference Bureau 4036/P1. In addition, the Senate Republicans have called for a hearing on the bill in Platteville, Wisconsin, 6.5 hours from the mining site for Friday, February 17th at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, which is known as the School of Mines for the state of Wisconsin. The descendants of former slaves of Muskogee Creek Nation members have petitioned the U.S. government to be recognized as their own tribe, a move that could set a legal precedent for thousands of Indian freedmen descendants around the country. The petition meets the requirements set by the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs and should be accepted, the freedmen's group's leader told the Tulsa World. If accepted, the petition could make the Creek freedmen descendants the first such group to become their own separate tribe. The group's leaders are now waiting for BIA officials to confirm that they have accepted the petition and have begun reviewing it. Edwin Marshall, Creek Nation Chief of Staff, said the tribe properly conducted a referendum to remove the freedmen descendants from the Creek Nation. Freedmen are the former slaves of Indians and were guaranteed full rights and privileges to the tribes to which they had belonged in the U.S. Treaty of 1866. The descendants have since become a central part of tribal sovereignty issues, as several tribes, including the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, have also voted to expel freedmen descendants from their ranks and from their roles. State wildlife authorities had no right to cite a Yakama Nation fisherman for catching undersized fish at the Columbia River tribal fishing site, the Washington Supreme Court ruled last week in a split decision. The case stems from a 2008 citation at the Maryhill Treaty Fishing Access Site, one of several sites set aside by Congress exclusively for 5 northwestern tribes to exercise their treaty fishing rights. The state had argued it rightfully assumed criminal jurisdiction there, but the High Court disagreed in a 6-3 decision from Olympia, Washington. The state lacks criminal jurisdiction at Maryhill because the treaty fishing access site is tribal land, established and reserved by Congress for the exclusive use of tribal members, the court wrote. And that is going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say thanks for joining with us and come back every Valentine's Day.